Greetings CAD junkies. Today we're going to be looking at patch layout in NURBS applications. As you can see here, I have a beautiful lamp designed by Richard Sapper. That's Richard S-A-P-P-E-R. He's one of my favorite designers. Really incredible. And he designs using very pure geometry. What I mean by that is, for example, these arms are basically just big cylinders, right? Big cylinders. And they're all over the place. Here, here, and then here he's got this extrusion. So you can see it's probably in section. Looks something like this. So you could easily in section this looks something like this, and basically you would draw that shape and extrude it to end up with something like this, right? You'd end up with this shape, and then all you have to do is trim off these ends, and you end up with a very simple blocky form like that. So that's very easy to do, and you don't even have to think about NURBS. You're just thinking in terms of, well, here's a shape, I extrude it, and I trim it, and that works. Similar thing down here on this base. Basically we have a cross section. It's something like this. Nope. So you draw a shape, something like this. You draw a center line. Actually, it would be vertical probably. And then you revolve that shape around that center, and you end up with this three-dimensional form, right? All the way around there. So we'll call this a revolve. And let's see, what else do we have? Up here we have a should be pretty obvious what that is. We'll call that a sphere. And we have a lot more cylinders, more extruded forms, a lot of repeated stuff. We have something a little more complex here. I won't bother looking at that now, but this is just a cylinder. And these are just a combination of different extruded forms. Obviously this here is another extruded rectilinear shape. Back here we have this basically a big cone. It's basically we'll just call that a cone. Back here we have another cylinder. And you can see what I'm saying. This design is very primitive. So you don't really need to think about patch layout to work with this design. Similarly here, this is very similar, designed by Alessi, that uses very primitive geometry. So this area here, you could think of it as a big cone or a revolve, right? Because you could draw this curve here and a center line and then revolve it. Well, we'll just say that. You revolve it and you end up with this big surface here. This handle could be a curve with a circular section on either end that is swept. So you just sweep a section along a curve. And we have another sphere. Now this here, this spout, I would think of this as an extruded shape that's intersecting with this cone. So actually I would think of it like this. It's an edge like that is extruded this direction down to another edge like this. Sorry about that. Okay. So, and then it's just trimmed off. So you have like that. So you end up with a final shape that looks like that, because it's actually a full surface that's been trimmed back. Okay, so that's the critical thing with patch layout. Is trimming. So let's move on and you'll see more of what I mean here. Okay, so this is a design by Walter Gropius, one of the founding fathers of the Bauhaus design movement. He's actually an architect. Obviously we have a big revolved surface again. So this is a big section that's been revolved in a whole circle. And then this hard line that we see right here is a dead giveaway for the actual topology of this. Let's put a new layer so I can work a little cleaner. Okay, so whenever I see a hard line, that is a dead giveaway that I have a separate surface. So this area up here is a separate surface from all this over here. This is, like we already said, a big revolved thing. And then it's trimmed right along this edge, and you have a separate surface up in here. And you notice we have another hard edge right along here, and so this area up here is actually a separate surface as well. So what if I were to change my color? Come up here, we say this is a separate surface. And then over here, all of this is another separate surface. So we have 1, 2, 3 separate surfaces at least right here, and wherever we see hard lines, the surfaces break. This is what we call patch layout in NURBS surface design. The patch layout is the layout of different surfaces on any given design that add up to making the final form. No one surface tool is going to create this whole pot for you. You're going to have to make a bunch of different surfaces to make this pot. So what might these be? Well, we know this is a revolved surface. This surface right here I would think of as a big rectangular patch. Well, not rectangular, four-sided. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3. I would think of it maybe something like this. So, I would think of this like one great big four-sided surface that's been trimmed back to this edge. Okay? Now, in NURBS, we've already discussed that every single NURBS surface, every single one, is actually four-sided. We know that all NURBS surfaces have a U and a V direction, and that they're all four-sided. There's nothing else. So in Rhino, if you're working in Rhino or an Alias or something like that, every single surface is four-sided. Even if you do one of these fancy five-sided fills or multi-sided fills, ultimately this is actually a trimmed surface. No matter what it is in Rhino or in Alias, it's actually a big trimmed surface. So this area here actually exists in the surface. It just may or may not show up. So it's actually one big surface that's been trimmed back. Okay? So that's how we're going to think about patch layout.